Hello and welcome to today's video. My name is DaLin, and normally I would describe myself or introduce myself on this channel by calling myself a makeup loving project planner. However, today I'm going to make a video that's not related to makeup. My apologies for my normal viewers, but I wanted to sit down and do a first trimester recap, kind of mostly for myself, but also I know there are some of you who've been so sweet and followed along over the past over a year, as long as my husband and I have been kind of on this journey to get pregnant. It's been a really hard time trying to do that. We've had some fertility issues, and I just think it would be nice to kind of clue everybody in, and just maybe one day when I look back on this video, it might be some sweet memories. I have some notes scribbled down here, and I just kind of wanted to ramble about what my experience was during my first trimester, and just start with, I think, to really kind of amp up and be able to properly explain to you what my experience was in the first trimester. I do need to touch on my past miscarriages. So my husband and I started well over a year ago trying to get pregnant, and our first time getting pregnant was actually a year ago in April, and I wasn't pregnant that long. I lost it right around the 5th week of pregnancy, so really shortly after finding out we were pregnant. It was a whirlwind of like fear, and then and fear by meaning like, holy crap, our life's about to change, and like we were excited, but a lot of fear. And then all of a sudden, like within that week, I lost that baby. And so it was just a whirlwind of emotion, of just being excited and scared, and then all of a sudden like devastated. And then in August of last year, we found out we were pregnant again, and I carried that time almost, I think it was almost 7 weeks. I think I was almost 7 weeks. I can't really remember. Maybe I was in my 7th week, closer to 8 weeks. But that one was pretty devastating, and I had a lot of physical symptoms from that miscarriage that I didn't have in the first one, because the first one I was so far along. I feel like it's important to kind of go into this pregnancy with the context in mind that I had had 2 past pregnancies that had failed, and I really was terrified. I was very excited when we found out we were pregnant again, and we found out in April that we were pregnant again. And honestly, this past April was just I knew it was going to be a hard month, because one, we lost our first baby in April. Also, the baby that we would have had in August would have been due in April. So I was kind of going into April like, I'm not looking forward to this month. Like, this month is gonna suck because of those emotional reminders. And so we knew we were trying, and there's so many months that we had gotten our hopes up, or been like symptom watching like a hawk, hoping that we would find out we were pregnant. And it just, those 2-week waits seem like they drag on forever, and then you get your hopes up and you're not pregnant. Going into April, I wasn't very optimistic that it was gonna be our month again, just because it had been historically not the best month for us. But we tested positive in April. In fact, my husband had suspicions before I did, and usually I'm the one who always knew first, because with both of the other pregnancies, my smell enhanced, and like I smell like I usually, my husband and I joke all the time that my nose is broken. Like it doesn't work properly because I won't smell things that most people smell. And I always, with both pregnancies and with this one, that was the first symptom that I always get. Before I notice my boobs being super sore, before I notice any other like symptoms, it's my nose. Like I can smell anything and everything. And I think like in April, I was like, in hindsight, I know I was doing some of that hypersensitivity of smell, but in my head I was thinking, you just want this to be true. So it was kind of like confirmation bias. I was afraid that I had confirmation bias, and I wasn't willing to believe that that's what it really was. But my husband was like, maybe, like he didn't want to get my hopes up, but he was really excited, and sure enough, like tested positive, which again was super exciting. But also, like, one of the first things that runs through my head is that, okay, we just need to make it as far as we can, because I know what it's like so far to lose 2 pregnancies. My early symptoms that I felt, again, were hypersensitivity of smell. Like, that's always the first one. Very sore breasts, but also, you know, sometimes that's not super uncommon, especially if you're about to get your period. But I will say that as you creep into those like early pregnancy weeks, it is a different, or at least for me, it was a completely different kind of pain, or like definitely more intense kind of soreness than anything that I've ever experienced in a period. And then also fatigue. And that's one that's hard for me to pick out, because realistically, if I'm being a lazy bum around the house and I want to lay around, I will feel like, okay, I want to take a nap. And I felt like I wanted to take a nap, and it was hard for me to parse out, is this pregnancy related, or is this like because I'm not doing anything and I'm not willing to get off the couch? So early on, it was kind of one of those things where I was like, I think I'm feeling pregnancy symptoms. I think I'm feeling pregnancy symptoms, but mostly I felt a lot of anxiety, and I ended up contacting the midwife really early. Here in Sweden, they set you up at a midwife clinic. You don't go see a doctor immediately. I'm not quite sure how they do things in the US because I haven't been pregnant in the US, but in Sweden, my experience so far has been that we go and see a midwife. So typically they don't see you until about the 8th week or so, or if they do, they really only bring you in to kind of tell you to like take prenatal vitamins and kind of get some basic information, but there's no actual like formal medical stuff really done. They might draw some blood. And so I did manage to see my midwife in the 6th week of pregnancy. However, she again told me, you know, we're not going to schedule like an ultrasound or anything like that and make sure anything's okay. We don't typically do that until like way later in the pregnancy. And I was trying to explain to her, which was another adventure in Sweden because I don't speak Swedish. My Swedish is so bad, and she didn't speak English very well. Probably saw me swat at a bug. That's the joys of Sweden as well. It's very hot today, and I have other rooms with the windows open, so I apologize if you see like a little bug in here because he's been hanging out with me all day. But anyways, my midwife's English isn't the best. My Swedish is awful. We have to have a translator on the phone. I think in maybe non-COVID times, they might have a physical, like a person in the room with you, but we just have someone that we typically call on the phone, which makes for very long appointments of things that should go very quickly. But I explained to my midwife that, look, I'm dealing with a lot of anxiety because of previous miscarriages, and what can we do? And she set me up an appointment for like somewhere in my 8th week to see a midwife at the hospital in town, and that's where only at the hospital in the town that I live in do they have like an ultrasound machine. And so she said, I'll set you up there. It's like later in my 8th week to go do that. Okay, great, that's fine. Then I found out that I had an option to see a private clinic in Sweden. The private clinics are like not free, but they're also like somewhat price controlled. Like they do have set prices. Like it's really nice. I could do a whole video about what the experience with the medical system here has been like. But I decided, you know what, I'm not gonna be okay waiting 2 more weeks. I've never made it to the 8-week mark, and it just I wasn't sleeping very well, and it was just scaring me to wait that long. So I was like, I think I'm gonna just go see the doctor at the other clinic and just see what he says. I wasn't really sure what would happen if he would do an ultrasound or whatnot. I actually went and saw that doctor when I was 6 weeks and 2 days, and he did a little ultrasound for me, and I measured exactly at 6 weeks and 2 days, which was such a huge relief. I don't think at the time, like I fully appreciated just how much that put my mind at ease, because in my previous pregnancy, the second pregnancy that I had, we tried to go get a ultrasound done, and I was measuring weeks behind, which turns out I knew then that I was going to miscarry, and I ended up starting to miscarry like the next day or the day after. So the fact that the baby was measuring, it looked like a little squish grape, like it just looks like a blob at that point. But the fact that I was measuring on time was really like a nice thing. And so I asked the doctor at the time, I'm like, I know I'm only 6 weeks, but you know, things that you read online or people talk about like having morning sickness around week 6, like those kind of pregnancy symptoms, those classic pregnancy symptoms that you hear about kick up at week 6. And I was like, I feel fine. Should I be worried? Because in my previous pregnancy, around week 6, in week 7, I was expecting to feel new pregnancy symptoms, and I didn't. And I knew, like back then, I knew in my heart of hearts that like something wasn't right. But with this pregnancy, it was hard to shake that worry. And so he was like, no, you're not pregnant with twins, so don't worry about it. Try not to worry. So then week 8 comes, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to keep my ultrasound appointment, go see this, and just double check again. By that point, the anxiety was again like creeping up because I don't have new pregnancy symptoms or that I was picking up on. And I felt pretty normal for the most part. So I went ahead and went to the second appointment. And at that appointment, I was measuring a little bit behind, not quite where I thought I should be. But then again, I realized like once I went home, I was like looking it up and I could tell that the baby had grown. So I was like, look, don't worry. We definitely saw a little heartbeat during it. And I was put to ease, especially seeing the heartbeat. I was like, okay, the fact that it's measuring a little bit behind isn't too worrisome. I'm gonna try to relax. But, and I went home and sure enough, I read that like different ultrasound machines can like have a plus or minus like so many days of like accuracy. And it was within that window that the pregnancy was measuring correctly. So that was really exciting. And it was actually shortly after that appointment that my pregnancy symptoms kind of amped up. And when I tell you about the other pregnancy symptoms, I'm gonna kind of buffer this with, it was such an odd experience overall in the first trimester because I've tried to explain it to other people. I've explained it to my husband the same way. It's one of those things where I used to watch the show, I didn't know I was pregnant, and I used to be like, what? How would people not know? Like, I thought it was just a very funny show because I just couldn't wrap my head around the fact that you wouldn't realize you were pregnant. And after experiencing my first trimester, I was explaining to my husband, like, I no longer, like, I take back every laugh that I, like eye roll that I gave that show. I get it now. Like, there are so many moments where I look back and I could have easily during that time kind of like looked at my symptoms and been like, oh, there's an easy explanation as to why I'm feeling this. And at the same time, I look back at my first trimester and I'm like, ooh, I did not feel good. So it's a really weird experience and a really weird like way to explain it. But I will say that after that 8th week or shortly after, I started experiencing way more exhaustion. Like, there were so many days where I would look at my husband and be like so tired. I was taking 2, sometimes 3 naps a day. I remember looking at him one day, especially towards the end of the first trimester, and I was like, have I ever been this tired? And like, I was almost in tears just how tired I was. Like, absolute tired. And another, like, one of the, I knew to expect that. I knew that like exhaustion and that fatigue is like a classic pregnancy symptom. So that made me feel somewhat good. At the same time, I was like, maybe I'm just sleeping like crap. We were going through a move here and it felt like it could have been explained away by like, oh, you're exhausted and things are stressful, so you're even more exhausted. But looking back on it, I'm like, oh, clearly that was pregnancy exhaustion, especially being in my second trimester now and feeling a little bit better. I'm like, yeah, that was definitely pregnancy exhaustion. But at the same time, I could have easily excused it away. Now, I feel like I've been rambling, but I'm trying to get into these other symptoms as quickly as possible. Smell sensitivity stays up, but it never made me puke. In fact, that was one of the big things that gave me a lot of anxiety during my first trimester, was that you hear that morning sickness is like such a classic symptom, and I really expected it to experience it at some point. Maybe not in the mornings, like morning sickness doesn't always strike in the morning. Sometimes it strikes later in the day, or sometimes it lasts all day. So I was expecting to feel super nauseous to the point where I would puke. In fact, I feel like my gag reflex is pretty like sensitive, and I was really expecting to really fight that feeling of wanting to puke. And I never, jinx knock on wood, I never puked during my first trimester. But at the same time, you might be able to imagine that for me and my doubting my ability to carry fully through the first trimester, that also gave me some anxiety. I was like, is something wrong with this pregnancy if I'm not getting that sick? Like, if I'm not sick to the point where I want to throw up. In fact, I think what I realize now is that my nausea, while it did show up, it usually showed up in the afternoons when I was really tired, but it never got to the point where I wanted to puke. I think what it really showed up as was not so much nausea, but it was food aversions. And I had never heard anything about food aversions until I experienced them. Like, I'm a creature of habit when it comes to food. I like to mix up dinners, but when I cook new meals quite often and try new recipes. But during the day, while I'm here at the house alone, I don't want to put in the effort to clean a kitchen and then have to cook again later. I just want to make something like usually a sandwich, but I can't really eat many sandwich deli meats, so I have gotten into the habit of eating eggs. I love boiled eggs. I typically boil up like a whole dozen at the beginning of the week, and like if I get hungry I eat a boiled egg, or I slice it up and put it on a cracker or put it in a sandwich. I really like them. But when I got pregnant, I was like, I can't look at a boiled egg. Like, I just can't. In fact, I felt that way about so many things. There were so many things that I would have eaten for lunch on a normal basis that I was like, I can't look at these things without, I didn't want to puke, but I definitely didn't want them to ever exist again in front of me. Like, I know it sounds so weird. And so here I was, my normal go-to lunches, my salads, my eggs, like they're all taken away from me because I'm like, I don't want eggs, I don't want veggies. I would eat something, like something would be like, oh, that sounds like, okay, I can do that. Like for example, perfect shining example was like, I saw somebody eat chicken salad probably on a YouTube video, and I was like, okay, chicken salad. I can eat chicken salad. That sounds so good. Bo made me a big batch of it. I ate it one day and I was like, I never want to look at chicken salad ever again. In fact, right now, to this day, I still don't want to eat chicken salad. I typically love chicken salad. Can't do it. So poor Bo, he doesn't even like chicken salad. He had like a whole container of chicken salad that he had to eat alone because those food aversions were real. The only foods that I managed to really eat and keep down, like want to keep down, were pastas. And even sometimes those pastas, like I didn't want to eat. Like I would make I remember getting a craving for spaghetti at some point. I was like, spaghetti sounds okay. Like, I don't hate the idea of spaghetti. Made myself spaghetti, and I was like, maybe I can survive off spaghetti for the week. The next day when it came time to make spaghetti again, I was like, I don't want spaghetti. One of the only things that I did manage to eat like routinely was like, if I wanted to get veggies in, the only way that I could get veggies in was like wrapping it in like a bread wrap. And Sweden has these really popular like flatbreads that are real thin, almost like a pita and a tortilla have a baby. So I managed to like stuff some veggies, like mostly just iceberg lettuce, really not a lot of like actual like good for you kind of stuff in there, and like maybe some chicken or kebab meat or something into a wrap, and like make myself a veggie wrap. And if it weren't for veggie wraps and even like pizza, I would order pizza, and like typically I love anything that it's covered in cheese. I would like scrape everything off and just eat the like pizza dough and like maybe a little marinara, and that's all I ate. So needless to say, I did gain a little bit of weight in the first trimester, which not that happy about, but it's okay. I survived it. I feel like that's the most important thing to say about that first trimester and all those food aversions, because the food aversions, when I look back on it, I think like, again, like in my real life at the time, I could have been like, it's just the stress, nothing sounds good, I'm so tired of eating the same thing, and it could have been like explained away like that. However, in hindsight now, feeling so much better and being able to eat like a normal human being again, I'm like, holy crap, that was pretty dang miserable, but I could have easily explained it away again. Okay, I have just a couple more notes and then I promise I'll wrap things up. One of them was that also that food aversion almost turned into hobby aversion, and it was a really, really odd experience. So like, as you know, I have a freaking makeup channel here on YouTube. I project pan and talk about makeup and put makeup on and geek over makeup with everybody in my comment section, and like that is a huge passion of mine. However, in my pregnancy, like it wasn't just, I didn't wear a lot of makeup in that first trimester, maybe 3 to 4 times total. Like literally, I would bet not 5 times. And I was just kind of like miserable thinking about even putting it on. Like it wasn't that I was so tired that I didn't have the energy to put it on, because that would make sense to me. It was that sometimes I could look at some of my makeup palettes or something and almost feel like my stomach would turn. Like it wasn't that dramatic, but it was like the same sensation I had at looking at eggs, I felt looking at some of my makeup items, which I still do not know how to explain away today. I still don't know what's going on with that. Like the best my brain can do is that I just didn't feel good, and my brain crossed some wires and was just like, yeah, these things just typically aren't good. Now I read online that like our bodies know to stay away from certain ingredients like talc and blah, blah, blah. I don't know if that's true, but I will say that I did have somewhat of a hobby aversion, which kind of is one of those things that I look back and I'm like, I wonder how much that plays into me also feeling one of my other symptoms, which was I felt a good bit of depression that I did not expect to feel in my first trimester. Like, I'm someone who typically has some anxiety. I'm way more of an anxious person than I am a depressed person. And typically any depression that I do experience just in my normal day-to-day life, not during pregnancy, any depression that I do experience comes from like prolonged periods of being anxious. So I'm anxious about something, I'm obsessed with something, I obsess, anxious, wear myself out, feel depression, right? Like, it's a cycle. That's my normal like mode of transportation through that mental health little traffic signal thing. But however, with this pregnancy, I would have some days, not all days, thank goodness, and usually it would be short-lived, maybe 2-3 days max, and then I would kind of come out of it. But I would have some days where I would just be so like definitely tired and fatigued. Like, again, that symptom was still there, but also so unmotivated to do anything that it felt like depression. It felt so similar to what I felt before in life, but I didn't have the anxiety leading up to it. Like, I didn't wear myself out. Like, I just came on, and the best I can gauge is that it was just chemical. And that puts me on somewhat high alert, knowing that I already know that in postpartum that I'm more likely to have either postpartum anxiety and or postpartum depression. But, you know, experiencing like prenatal depression in my first trimester as much as I did, and it being as severe as it was some days, I'm definitely like going to try to research as much of that as I can, make sure I solicit help, and like go ahead and try to come up with a couple ways that I can like, I have some ways kind of written down in my head that I need to kind of approach it, but I still need to do a little bit more research on that, because that was one that took me by surprise, and it was pretty powerful, and I can only imagine how powerful it will be postnatal or like post-term kind of with baby, when you're exhausted and your body is also trying to heal itself and going through so many hormonal changes. Like, it will be a big change. So I almost forgot like a super important piece of like the first trimester that I definitely don't want to forget. So hopefully I'll figure out a good place to put this clip in. But I was mentioning that, you know, I was very nervous, had 2 other ultrasounds, and at some point, right before we were going home, I got really nervous about traveling. Like, what if I'm not healthy enough to travel? What if I am, you know, like, if I get on the plane, I'm not healthy, and then we get home and I start to miscarry and I need to be back in Sweden. So Bo and I decided, why don't we go to the clinic, the private clinic in Sweden again, make sure, just kind of see what he says about traveling and that kind of thing. And the doctor did another transvaginal ultrasound and got to see the baby again. So at this point I would have been somewhere in my 11th week. I don't know exactly like how many days, like 11 weeks, so many days, but oh my goodness, it was so surreal. And if I have a little video clip that I should be able to insert into this video of the little baby, and it waved. It did like a little wave, and it was the most precious thing. I was just in shock to see it no longer look like a squished grape like it had in the like previous ones. Like, even in the one that I had done at like 8 weeks, you can see that it's grown, but it still kind of looks like a little bit like a squished grape. And it looked so much more like a baby at this point. Like, it had a physical head and like a body and little arms, and it physically waved, and I was just like shocked. And like, I remember, because Bo can't be in the like rooms with me, I remember walking out and just like hugging him and just crying, because it was the sweetest thing that I just didn't expect to see. It was so surreal just seeing, it like literally had little hands and little feet, and it was really, really sweet and special. So I don't want to leave that part out. Hopefully it doesn't disrupt the video too much, just sneaking it in here. But yeah, let's get back to it. But yeah, I think this video has been long enough. I feel very rambly in it. I looked over and I think I covered most of my notes. There are some notes at the bottom that I didn't get to about like trying to conceive, and I probably can make a whole different video about that. But I won't get into those today. Yeah, I hope that you enjoyed it. If you made it this far, wow, I don't know what to say. I hope you look forward to the second trimester video that I will eventually get to make. But if you made it this far, leave me a little emoji, like a little heart emoji or something, just to know that you made it that far. And thank you for letting me ramble about my first trimester. I am still extremely terrified about all the changes that are to come. And but mostly I'm very excited, and I'm excited that I could even have a chance to make this video. Like, I'm about to get emotional. Let me get off of here. Anyways, I miss you guys. Make sure you say hello, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.